Health experts are keeping a close eye on the bird flu outbreak all across the country, which has now been found in dairy cows in about 9 states.
That's right. Joining us tonight to talk more about it, Onondaga County Health Commissioner Dr. Katie Anderson. Katie, always good to see you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with this. Some people may have heard of bird flu or avian flu, but really, what is it? Try to give us some sort of baseline, what we're talking about here, and kind of how it's developed again.
So let's talk a little bit about the various phases of flu and why we're hearing so much about it right now, especially when the flu season from the winter died down a few weeks ago. So why are we hearing so much about flu right now? And so on the one hand, we have our seasonal flu, or the flu that we see every winter, and that's human viruses that are shifting a little bit, they're evolving, and so we need to get new updated flu vaccines every year. And they can be serious. They can cause disease and death in particularly vulnerable people, like older adults. But that's a totally different beast than the pandemic flu, like avian flu that we're hearing about right now. So to paint a picture of that, we think back to 1918 flu, the Spanish flu, as a severe example of what pandemic influenza can look like. And these are different viruses. So these result when you have a human virus that mixes in some animal with another virus. In 1918, it was also a bird virus. And they swap genes like cassettes, which means that it can now infect humans, but it has various other features that our bodies have never seen before, and we don't have immunity. So they can spread fast. They can be very serious and cause a lot of death and disease. The 1918 flu killed more people in a matter of months than any other illness in human history. Wow. So we're not there yet with H5N1, but that sets the scene for why we're hearing so much about it right now. So a little bit about H5N1. So this is something that the scientific community, health experts, have been watching for about 20 years. It started out in wild birds. That's its natural host. Over the last 20 years, we've had repeated outbreaks, even in New York, even in the U.S., in domestic fowls, so backyard chickens, chicken flocks for commercial purposes. And it's since jumped to about 200 different mammals. And each time it jumps, it raises concern in the scientific community because it's getting that much closer to humans.
Right, especially now the concern is because we're hearing it's in cattle. Any indication it's in New York cattle?
Right, and the reason that there's been a little bit more discussion and people are hearing about this avian flu when it jumped to cattle is because humans are around cattle a lot. Over the last 20 years, there have been some deaths from people who worked with animals that were infected with avian flu. And there's concern that dairy cattle, there's a lot of dairy cattle in New York. We're the 5th largest producer of dairy in the country. We don't yet have evidence that it is in cattle in New York. There's been one case in the United States of H5N1 in a human that worked with dairy cattle, and that was in Texas. That was very mild. There's no sign that in any of these infections there's been extensive human-to-human spread, but it's a cause for increased monitoring.
How does it get from A to B to C? So from the birds carrying this flu virus to the cattle, and from the cattle to the humans?
So there's certain...
If it's from cattle to humans, I guess.
It can be, or it could be from birds to humans. The concern is there's certain species that serve as kind of the mixing pots. Pigs is a big example, and we're concerned that dairy cattle might be another example, where they could get bird viruses and they could get human viruses. So right now, the virus that we're seeing, and I want to reassure people, I made references to 1918, we're not there. The virus that we're seeing across the United States right now does not have the potential to cause significant human disease and go person to person. But if you had a human virus, one of our common winter human seasonal viruses, that mixed with a different virus in the setting of a cow, a bird virus, for example, it could take off and cause severe disease. So this jump to a new mammal, this jump to dairy cattle, is just one more step closer to potentially a pandemic virus.
Yeah, and because people wonder, well, can it go from the cow to the milk we drink?
So there have been some signs that there's the H5N1 virus in milk in the United States, not necessarily in New York. But there's no sign yet that it could be infectious to people. And certainly pasteurization, where they treat milk and cheese and they heat it to a high temperature, that would kill the virus. So one thing that people need to know right now is it's okay to keep eating your cheese. It's okay to keep drinking your pasteurized milk. It's okay to eat beef, but this is not the time to be eating raw beef, drinking raw milk.
That's what
pasteurized is key.
Pasteurized
we were going to ask you about raw milk, but I think you pretty much
good time to stay away from raw milk and raw cheese.
how are we staying on top of this? Like, what sorts of measures, monitoring? I think maybe Christy, talked about, like, how do you even know if somebody or some person or some animal has bird or avian flu?
Yeah.
What tests are there?
So the CDC is monitoring dairy cattle farms right now. It's likely underreported, but they're working on it. Okay. We've learned some things from the SARS-CoV-2 or the COVID pandemic, which you would hope we would have. So, for example, wastewater monitoring is being, well, it's continued for SARS-CoV-2, but now they're adding in influenza A and H5N1 as part of that. So they're going to be monitoring levels. Right now, flu should be going down with the end of the winter season, but they'll be watching to see if it goes up. So we have learned a thing or two about testing and surveillance, and certainly they'll continue to keep a close eye with this dairy cattle H5N1 situation.
Okay, so it's just some reassuring advice for people right now. There's nothing to panic about when we're hearing more stories about avian flu, bird flu.
Nothing to panic. As the CDC says, they are on alert but not alarm right now.
Okay, very good.
Good way to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Dr. Katie Anderson, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it. We'll see you again soon.
Good to see you.